All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the introduction to senior year for the class of 2026. We are so excited to really turn over and get started working with this class. It does go quickly this year, so I hope that they will make the most of their time here and enjoy every moment, even the ones that seem pretty stressful, because they will get to the other side and they will have successful outcomes. As we're doing this, so what's going to happen here is in just a second, I'm going to ask our counseling staff to introduce themselves. They'll review their caseload so that you know which school counselor works with your student in case you have not met them or not familiar with them. So you can put a face to that name that you'll be getting emails from. And then I'll go ahead into the presentation. Throughout this presentation, we do have a Q&A button down at the bottom. So if you have questions, you can answer a question there. I definitely recommend holding on a little bit because a lot of times I am going to get to it. But our counselors will be kind of in the background answering those questions throughout as well. This presentation last year lasted probably about 45 to 50 minutes or so. Following this part of the presentation, our school counselors will be breaking down into different rooms. We're just using Google Meet for that part so that we can turn on cameras and microphones and ask any questions in smaller groups to make that a little bit more accessible for you. So with no further delay, I am going to ask Mrs. Housel, who is at the top of the alphabet, to get us started.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Housel, and I have a senior caseload for letters A through BRA.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jade Akinrolabo. My caseload is BRE to DEF.
Hi, everyone. I'm Toby Flagg. I have the alphabet of DES through GRO.
Hi, everyone. I am Razia Idris, and I have the caseload of GUE to KAN.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jalisa Williamson. My caseload is KAR to LOP.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Sayer, and my senior alphabet is LOW through OLI.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fernando Torres. My letters are ORO to RUF.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Regitz. My letters are PAR to SAL. And as most of you know who have me, because I sent an email in June, I will be going out on maternity leave in about a week and a half. So my leave replacement is on tonight, Miss Kreckle. She's great. So she'll be taking over approximately around October 1st.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Brittany Kreckle. Like Mrs. Reggett said, I'll be covering her leave. I was an intern last year, and I look forward to coming back to HHS.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Johnston. My senior caseload is SE to Thompson. And I too will be out on maternity leave coming up soon around the middle of October. My leave is also on this meet, so I will let her introduce herself now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nina Delmonico. Like Ms. Johnson said, I will be covering her leave.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aziza Hassan, and I have student caseload, senior caseload that starts with TIG all the way to the end of the alphabet.
All right, thanks so much, counselors. You guys can go ahead and turn off your screens so that you can start answering the questions as they come in. And then I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Give me just 1 second to get there. All right, so just to give you kind of the lay of the land for what we'll be doing tonight, just kind of review some of the basics to make sure we kind of catch everybody up so that we're at the same point with some background knowledge. Talk about the different components of the application. I think what I really want to get across to you all is kind of how this process works. Who sends what you need to make sure that your kid is doing when, et cetera, so that you feel like you kind of know what's going on. This type of information is also, already been sent out to students at the very beginning of the summer, but we're going to be going over it with more detail with a very similar presentation to this in our upcoming senior groups. So we're letting Ms. Johnston and Ms. Regitz go first. to make sure that they can get to their students immediately. They're starting groups tomorrow. And so really we'll be going through groups for about the next week and a half. So students are going to have access to this information as well. I have an email pretty much queued up to go out to them as well to get going once I can add in the recording from this. And parents, so that you know, parents and guardians, I do copy you on any of the kind of like mass communications that go out. So no one will ever say that I under communicate. I perhaps over communicate, but I try to make sure that you're all on the same page. My goal is that, you know, if you're seeking extra help, we can provide that to you, but that you should be able to kind of stay on track, really just by kind of following the communications that I send out. That'll be enough if that's what you choose to do. If you need more, you know, we're here for more. But we want to make sure we're getting you all of that information. So I typically send out emails through the fall, probably about every 2 weeks, sometimes a little bit more often. So you should expect to receive those as well. If I'm just communicating to students about things about their application, maybe I notice things are missing, I'm just going to send that to the students directly until they don't acknowledge it, don't answer me, nothing changes a couple times, then I start looping in parents and guardians to help that process get along. So one thing we do want to make sure that you know, I sent out an email last week. We have started with our college representatives coming in. The first day of that was yesterday. So we've had a couple come in already. I know Drexel was here. I think Gettysburg was here yesterday. Purdue, UPenn, Penn State have all been here. UMiami has been here. And I feel like I'm missing one more from yesterday. So we've started off strong. This will continue all the way through the end of October. Students are permitted, seniors, to sign up for 8 visits. I really, really, really recommend to them that they consider which ones they're going to sign up for. So the ones that I would say are the best use of their 8 visits are schools that consider demonstrated interest. So like today, Miami, one of the first things she said was, you know, we consider demonstrated interest. We want to know that you were here, right? So that's a good, you know, visit to attend, schools that do that. Also schools that are maybe further away, that you haven't had the opportunity to visit. Those are really good visits to attend. And also I find that visits for those schools as well as smaller schools are really kind of the best bang for your buck in terms of a visit, because I find they make have much more conversation instead of it being a little more kind of like group lecture style, very similar to the information sessions you do on campus. So sometimes I have students that are bummed that places like Rutgers, hey, at Miss Thompson, that visits at its capacity, can I sign up? We do have a capacity because it just gets too big, and frankly, it's, you know, challenging for us to manage, and there's room capacity limits for some things. But also, quite frankly, Rutgers is right down the road. Rutgers is 20 minutes away. I would really, really much rather students go to the Rutgers campus and attend an information session there and do the tour. They're going to get the same information that they're going to get when they're in our building, but they'll have the much more valuable experience of being on campus as well. So we do kind of, you know, I would say that's my direction in terms of kind of what to sign up for. These will be going through the end of October. Students do need to sign up on SCORE. And so I have been reminding of that when they attend something that they neglected to sign up for. I give them a little reminder so that we can fix it for the next time. Just to kind of review what we're talking about in terms of timelines here. I'm going to start with the 4-year piece, which is, I know it's on the right, but it makes more sense to me. The timeline for applying to 4-year schools really kind of starts, you know, around now, and some students may have already sent out applications, and that's okay. And the bulk of that is really going to finish by most of it by the beginning of January, and then we'll have some straggling throughout the month of January. We're going to talk as we go a little bit further about who sends what, but know that the 4-year schools are the ones that need the most stuff, the letters, the transcripts, scores, etc. Then we've got 2-year schools. We have a lot of students who, you know, go to RVCC, which is our local 2-year school. That obviously there are a lot more of them. We do have plenty of students who just apply to RVCC. They know that's their plan, and they're not also applying to 4-year schools. But we also have a lot of students who kind of walk the line between both options. They apply to 4-year school. They're also keeping their foot in the 2-year pool, and they're going to decide in the spring, once they see financial aid packages, see what their acceptances are, then they're going to make that decision as to what they're going to do. And that is a perfectly okay thing to do. On the whole, the 2-year application process does tend to be a little bit later. We are going to be doing kind of an early bird application workshop in December this year, and then we'll do another one in February. You can apply to 2-year school all the way up until next school year starts, though. So there's not really a too late in terms of applying to 2-year schools. As I mentioned, we will do application workshops at HHS during the school day. I just met with our Raritan Valley representative yesterday. She's going to come back in December to do our first ones. They're not looking at transcripts as a part of the process. SATs and ACTs aren't required. You can use them to kind of determine your placement, but they also utilize NJGPA for English course placement, and they utilize math, high school math course grades for math placement. So students can choose to placement test if they want to challenge those, but it's really up to them. No letters of recommendation for that process, unless a student is applying to RVCC Honors College, which can really be a fantastic spot for students. If you look up Raritan Valley Honors College, they do have the criteria online. Don't get too hung up on all of those specifics. I would say our students who really look at Raritan Valley Honors College are students who have typically at least some honors and AP courses. They typically have weighted GPAs, I would say, in the mid 90s and up. Those students would probably be competitive for honors college admission, even though they probably aren't in the top 20% of the class. And our VCC understands, where our students fall, and that's typically the kind of student that they're accepting from Hillsborough. In terms of how can students apply to 4-year schools now, we've got 3 different options, and I want to make sure we understand as we keep going. We've got early decision, and that is the binding option. So if a student gets in early decision, they're attending there. So what you really want to do is to make sure that could be a financial fit for your institution. And parents, I think that this is really important for you. Sometimes I see students are really, yes, I want to apply to ED, but they're not really considering that financial end of it. And they're like, well, I can just back out. But backing out isn't always really easy. Also, the timeline of it is terrible, quite frankly, because it's right before winter break. Schools immediately close for the winter break, the colleges. So you kind of can't get back and be talking with them. We're closing. The regular decision deadlines are right on the tail end of winter break. So there's no time to work out a whole lot. And it is very stressful for students. So I really encourage you to do your homework ahead of time by using net price calculators for schools to get an idea of what your family should expect to pay at that school. I really recommend for ED families that you PDF the results of that at least, so that when you do get that financial aid package, you've kind of got a starting point for a conversation if that financial aid package does not at all resemble what you thought it was going to be, right? So that's a really good way to give yourself a little bit of leverage, at least, to having that conversation when a package is not reasonable. For students to ED, I really feel strongly that they should have visited, hopefully multiple times. The reality is it's not right for the majority of students. In terms of early decision schools, it's only a small subset of schools that even offer early decision. Rutgers is not an early decision school. Penn State is not. Pitt is not. A lot of our most popular schools are not ED schools. So don't assume every school has early decision, because they don't. ED deadlines tend to be November 1st for the most part for early decision round 1. Some schools also offer an early decision round 2, and the deadlines for that tend to be in the January 1st-ish neighborhood. Yes, a student, I'll answer the question now because I know I'm going to get it. Can a student apply to an ED1 and an ED2? Yes, they can if they are not admitted to the ED1. So the decisions coming out of early decision 1 can be yes, congratulations, you're accepted. They can be no, I'm sorry, you're not accepted. And if the answer is no, you're not accepted, the student is done with that school for this year. You can't reapply under another decision plan, you're done. The third option may be you've been deferred. And that means that a student will be reconsidered typically under the regular decision plan. So they'll be considered and re-reviewed alongside the regular decision applicants, typically in that like January, February, March kind of time frame. So that is the other option. For students who've been deferred or denied, they can apply early decision 2 to another school if they had a clear second choice that they want to do that with. We just ask that, they do have to hold off. They can't send in that ED2 application until they've gotten a decision from the ED1 school. And the counselors and I can talk to students about that if they're thinking about that. Much more popular, way better fit for most students is early action. Students apply early, they find out early, but they are not required to go there. What that really buys you is the ability to get decisions from the other schools the student has applied to, and not just decisions, but also financial aid packages, including merit scholarship offers, etc. Because of the time frame of ED1, you're going to get that decision in December. You will not have even heard from a Rutgers and most other schools on a student's list, even if they send out their application, even if they put in the applications, because the student's not even going to hear from those schools for admission until January, which is too late because they would have already had to have withdrawn their applications. But EA is different. It gives them all of that time to make that decision. There are a couple of schools, Georgetown, Yale, Stanford, Princeton, Notre Dame, might be missing one, that have special early action policies. They care basically where else you're applying. What I'm going to tell you about those is I'm not going into detail. I look up those students as we start to get closer. I look and score and try to see who's got these schools on. And I email them and I tell them the schools you have on your list don't go together. You can't do these things. You need to pick. So we do help out, and I help out those students and try to make sure that they're following the rules that are out there, because I do recognize they're a little complicated for students to follow. I mean, they're 17 and 18-year-olds, right? And there's a lot of details. So try to make sure that save them from themselves. Other options out there, regular decision, those deadlines, vary by schools, maybe much later. My big one there is students should not be fooled by seeing a regular decision deadline that is like July 1st. That does not mean that they should wait out their entire senior year and apply like next June. They should go ahead and get those applications in, and those schools are going to go ahead and review their application and get the student a decision. There's also rolling admission. And what rolling means is that as they receive applications, they make decisions and send them out. They don't have a firm deadline. One thing that's important to know about rolling schools, number one, most popular for us being University of Pittsburgh, is that as time goes on, because they're sending out decisions, they have fewer spots available. So for Pittsburgh, I always tell students, get those. That's a great first application to send out if a student is applying there. You know why? Because we don't have to do anything. Like me, I don't have to do a thing for them, because it's all on the student. They're submitting their own application and essay. They have to complete their self-reported transcript on their own. They send their own scores. They don't take letters. They don't take a transcript. They don't take anything else. So once the student's ready, they can move on it. They can submit it. Pitt will start making those decisions. They've sent some decisions out already, and they will continue to do that. I find that when students apply in September and in the first half of October, they typically receive a decision a lot of times in like 2 to 4 weeks. It's pretty quick. The later they get in October, the more they get kind of caught in that November 1st hustle when kids are just submitting all their applications at once. And then it takes longer to get that decision. Once we move into kind of the post-Thanksgiving timeframe, I find that students are much less likely to get a positive decision from University of Pittsburgh because they have started to really fill up their spots, and the remaining spots have gotten more and more difficult to get. So, kind of that's where I might be encouraging your kid, like that's a great first one to hit submit on, is Pittsburgh, because there's a big win. Even if a school like that is not their favorite, most first choice school, your kid will be the most excited person in the whole world when they get their first college acceptance. It's super exciting for all of you. It's super exciting for them. And it's so meaningful for them to see that like someone wants them and they're getting into college. They get so worried. They kind of have this irrational fear that like, no one wants me. I'm not going to get in anywhere. this isn't going to work out. And no matter what school it is, they will be really, really happy when they get that first one. So this kind of hastens that process a little bit. And for some students, schools like Pitt and other schools that send out earlier decisions, they can be a great barometer for kids, because if it's a school that they think they should be good at, like they should be accepted, and the decision they get is not an accept, we know that, hey, like, you should reach out to Ms. Thompson. We probably need to recalibrate a little bit that application list and make sure we have some true probable schools on that list, because the school you thought was a probable isn't. So they're great for that. There's lots of different application forms out there. I just want to explain the difference between Common Application and SCORE, which is very confusing for a lot of people. So SCORE is the system that we use to kind of manage the application process for students. We send out transcripts, teachers upload letters of recommendation there, and we send them out. We use it to communicate with students about where they're applying. So they put schools on their list there, and that's how we know where to send their stuff out to. And it goes right out through SCORE. It also does have an application system. There are around 130 schools that students can apply to using SCORE. So that is an option as well. If students want to complete the SCORE app, they can. I find that most of our students really go towards the Common Application, because it is most likely that their schools are all on the Common App. And our goal is to really kind of fill out the fewest application forms possible and stop regurgitating the really basic information unless they need to do that for some reason. One big thing to know for those with longer lists is that the Common Application does limit to 20 schools. That is a hard limit. There's not a way to apply to more than 20. So I always advise that students really kind of work things out ahead of time to be sure that they're allocating their applications accordingly if they will have a long list. So there's lots of different types of applications that a student can submit. One big important thing, and I'll reiterate it, is that SCORE and Common App do not talk to each other. So I cannot see, and Ms. Hassan cannot see, none of us can see what is in a student's Common Application account. They cannot opt out of using SCORE for the application management piece. I've mentioned a couple of times transcripts. So transcripts are sent by the school counselor, or sometimes me if I'm kind of helping and pushing some things out, just to kind of get things moving. One thing that is a wild thought to pretty much anyone over the age of like 25 is that some schools don't require a transcript. They utilize a self-reported academic record or some type of self-reported transcript. And some of the most popular schools for our students, kind of go this path. So Rutgers, Penn State, Pitt, NC State, Virginia Tech, the whole University of California system, University of South Carolina, none of them utilize transcript from the school counselor. In the case of South Carolina, they just need to upload their unofficial transcript. You can always find that, by the way, in Genesis. It's under grading and then transcript. And just so that we know, that transcript you see right there, it's not different from what we're sending out. The only thing different about what we send out that makes it official is that it has a signature and a little digital seal on it. The rest of it looks exactly the same as what the school is going to get. So don't think that there's anything secret out there, because there's not. For the schools that require the self-reported record, and we'll use Rutgers here as an example, because statistically, most of our students are going to apply there. So students will need to manually, actually, they've got two choices. One, old school, manually enter each course and each grade into the STARS system, into the application system, or whatever that school uses to collect these records. They're basically regurgitating their transcript. Why do schools do this? Honestly, it cuts time for the school because they don't need to wait for a transcript. They don't have to keep asking a student for it. They, on their side, it's a lot less processing time. You've also given it to them in a way so that they can do all the slicing and dicing that they want just through that academic record. So how easy is it to pull those math grades when the student has already typed all the math grades in under category math? Really easy, right? So that's why schools do this. One of the systems that is most popular, STARS, formerly known as SRAR, is piloting a new AI-driven method where a student can upload the transcript, it reads it, and it spits it out into the fields. Thus far, it seems fairly successful, but it's also September 16th. So I definitely reserve the right to go back on that and tell students, don't do that. It's messing up our transcripts. You know what I mean? It's not reading right, or, you know, don't use it, manually type it in. So we'll see how it goes as the process goes on. I mentioned the word STARS, formerly known as SVAR. So there is, unfortunately, like many parts of college application, no consistent way for everybody that everybody does this. I wish there were, but there isn't. So the collection of schools that you see in front of you, including Rutgers, uses a system called STARS, formerly known as SVAR. The good thing is that for all the places that they're applying to that are on this page here, they only have to do all of that data entry once. That part of it is fabulous. That's really great. What is not great is that everybody has their own little process for then linking the STARS to the college. So students really do need to follow the directions for that piece. This is a place where, for many of these schools, but not all, I have access to see application status for the Hillsborough applicants. And I do a lot of work here to try to save students from themselves. So I send out a lot of emails to students applying to UDEL a couple days before the STARS deadline, saying like, hey, it is still not linked. If you haven't done this in the past day, you need to do this. Here's the directions. If you don't know how to do it, come see me now and I will help you get this in. So I do a lot of work to try to save them from themselves and help them meet those deadlines. I wish it was all the same, like I said, but it's not. There are, of course, other ways to report things for different schools. Again, not the same. So Common Application has a section of courses and grades, and there's a not super long list of schools that require that. Here's sort of some of the most popular ones for our students. Purdue, I would say, is the most notable, where we have the most applicants. Some schools use their own system. So University of California has their system. University of Illinois has their system. South Carolina does something. Houston does something else. University of Central Florida does something else. What can be super annoying is that if your child is applying to a certain selection of 10 or 12 really big schools, they might have to self-report their grades in 4 or 5 places. And it's not hard, but it is time consuming, and they should, kind of budget for that in the process. And frankly, it's also a place where it's difficult to keep track of all of those details. I did mention, what they were entering. This just kind of gives you a quick view of the kind of information of how this data entry is happening. It more or less looks like this. And we work with students on it. Next thing I just wanted to talk about was standardized testing. We have seen a few more schools switch to test required since we chatted last spring. I've got most of them over there in the blue box on the right, so a few of them have added. So for those schools, there's no question deciding, am I sending them or not? We still got a lot of schools in that yellow section and test optional. So what I really encourage students to do, and I'm happy to help them do that. Overall, my advice is, 1, how do you feel about your score? But 2, for each school, how does your score compare to typically the middle 50% of admitted students there? So if you're applying to Rutgers and the middle 50%, which is kind of the group that's in the middle of it, and then we've got our lower 25 and our upper 25. The one that's in the middle, though, starts around like a 1320 or so for Rutgers, or 1340. So if a student has an 1150 and they've got a 98 GPA, that 1150 is really not going to help them in admission. And so I tell them the best option there is to apply test optional. If they're well within that range, then absolutely be sending those scores. They support their application. For students whose GPAs, whose grades might be lower than what the school is typically looking for, and they've got a score that's even just kind of eking into that middle 50%, or even just kind of close up to there, it probably may still be helpful for them. So it is a very individual decision. Students can decide one school at a time how they're going to apply. It's not an all or nothing for all the schools that they're looking at. So that's an important thing to know as well. We do still have a couple schools out there that are test blind. Oh, I forgot to move Caltech. How we went from test blind to test required in 1 year, I really don't know, but they did. And for those schools, most notably the University of California and Cal State systems, they do not look at test scores at all. Letters of recommendation, a couple different kinds of them. We've got a counselor letter. There are teacher letters of recommendation, and some students may utilize outside letters of recommendation as well. Let me just make sure. So we're going to go into those in detail. The biggest thing I would say is that students really need to, it's a good idea for them to take a look and know what is required or accepted for each of the schools that they're looking at, because many of our most popular schools, those big places, don't accept letters of recommendation. So every year I've got students email me, how come you didn't send my letters to Rutgers? Because Rutgers doesn't want them. They will not accept them. They will not read them. There's no way to even send it to them. So that's why. So that it's a good idea for them to take a check of that. There is a way to do that in SCORE. If they click on the school's name from their My Colleges list, it tells them the things that are required there, and they can see that. They can also check the school's website. For students who have not asked teachers yet, now is the time to do that. Once they ask them in person, they'll put that request into SCORE. We'll review this with them in our groups. The biggest thing that I would say about letters of recommendation, especially teacher letters of recommendation, is I encourage students and families to please be patient. We do have just about 600, a little shy of 600 students in the senior class. Our goal is to get everybody's materials out by the deadline. I will tell you, we are a very November 1st heavy school. And so some of the counselors are writing 35, 40 letters for November 1st, and that's a lot. We have some teachers who are writing close to that many also for November 1st. So someone's gets written first, and someone's gets written in the middle, and someone's gets written last. But as long as the student has done what they needed to do and they've hit all of the checkpoints by the dates that we give them, then we're going to get those letters done, and they're going to get out by the deadline, what the schools are looking for. They are not, many schools, most schools, I would say, are not reading applications, at least in the Northeast, especially, anytime soon. So I heard from schools just today, we will start reading after the November 1st deadline passes. So, you know, rest assured, we're going to work to get those things in as soon as we can after the student applies. But, you know, everybody would rather take the time we can to make sure that we're advantaging the student as much as possible. So we want to get all those things in by the deadline, but we also want to make them as good as possible, just like your student wants to do with their application. There are a couple things that we ask students for that counselor letter. We've been kind of reinforcing these things with them. They do show in their SCORE account, there's like a to-do list when they first log in. So they're going to see these things there. That's where they find that student brag sheet. Parents, if you would like to do a parent brag sheet, that's available to you as well. We're not requiring it this year. It's optional for you. You can find it within your own SCORE account, in which case your student can't read it, or you can find it within your child's SCORE account, in which case they can see what you did. So do what you want with that. Counselors also collect some additional info that can be helpful in shaping their letters of recommendation as well. Just to give you a timeline on when this stuff is due, at least 2 weeks before the first deadline. So I've actually been pretty pleased to see a lot of students, or a good number of students, have done their brag sheets already. That's really helpful, because now that we've gotten through add drop in the counseling office, we can start to shift towards letter writing. I know that Ms. Regetz was thrilled that she got some letters done today. Essays. Good news is that pretty much all of our students wrote at least one college essay in their junior year English class, which is fantastic. So they have some kind of starting point. That should not be a final point. So students really should continue to work on that, that essay that they wrote last year. If they haven't pulled it back out, either they need to pull that one back out or they need to run a new one. Whatever they're doing is perfectly fine. But, you know, it probably requires more work, not a final product. I think it's really, really important to remind students that it really does need to be their own work, written in their own voice, and ChatGPT is not that. And I did even hear Miami say today, someone asked, what are some of the biggest mistakes people made? And she said, every year we're flagging a certain number that were very clearly written by AI. So students, you want to make sure that you're still utilizing your voice. And if you're using Chat GPT or something else on the side to help you kind of like think through different options in a way to say things, okay, but we're not like we're not putting in like write an essay about this and then plopping it into a document. That's not what we're doing here. So some schools require just that main essay. Some schools don't use an essay at all, but many use that one main essay. Others may have additional essays as well, commonly called supplemental essays, though your mileage may vary. They may be called something else. And so those would be school-specific additional essays. And the students are pretty well aware of what those are. In terms of who can review essays, I do offer to review essays for students. That will generally start probably next week. The thing to know is students should allow at least up to 2 weeks for me to get them feedback. I do tend to get a really long list, and there's a lot going on in the fall. I don't review essays with students in person. Time just realistically does not allow for that. Again, 600 of them. We've got 120 college visits coming in. You can see how this becomes a problem very quickly. And we only have 6 weeks until November 1st. So I ask that they Google Doc share it with me with editing permission so I can comment and suggest and all of those things within there. For students, I'm able to do kind of their main essay and like up to one supplemental essay is realistic. What's really realistic for me. I don't want to have students sending me things that I just know I can't realistically get to. So that seems to be the most fair answer for all. Some of the other things that you got to put out there, I always get questions about AP scores. Where do those go? Only Georgetown requires the official scores sent from College Board. For all of the other ones, you'll put them in on the application. Some schools look at AP scores in the admission process. Some schools do not look at AP scores in the admission process. That really varies from school to school, but they can certainly put that in there. Activities and awards, those kinds of things, extracurriculars, that's all going into the application form itself. There are specific limits on character counts and word counts and all those kinds of things. Nobody wants copies of certificates, letters of verification. If they've got some letter from a program they attended that, and the content is really just verifying that they were in this thing and it is not personal to the student, that is not helpful for them in the admission process. Letters that are helpful for students are people that know them personally, can relate experiences about that are specific to that student and differentiate them from other students as well. So that's kind of what we're going for. And that's sort of the dividing line on helpful, not so much helpful. I personally really recommend resumes only if they're accepted and it's not a repeat of the activity section. If they're just repeating the activity section on prettier paper and nicer fonts and fancy bullets, that's really not helpful. It's just dividing the reader's attention so that they're spending less time on each individual thing instead of more time to absorb the information that students put out there. So I kind of liken the whole application to like a jigsaw puzzle, and we want to have lots of different pieces that fit in and connect to each other. We want our essays to connect maybe to our extracurriculars or other things, and we want everything to kind of abut each other. But what we don't want is the same piece again and again and again. So that's a good reason why we, limit ourselves to fewer letters of recommendation, really go for that 2 for teachers, to have them work together and not just be talking about the same exact thing. We already know. So we want to make sure they're fitting together. My one exception with the resume is the University of Texas, Austin, who really, really wants that expanded resume. And I've got some specific information I'll be sending out to students about that. Outside letters, we've got a couple of different ways to handle that. We'll review those things with the students in the coming weeks, how they can get us that information. Portfolios, auditions, those that are going through that process, another place, no common method. I'm sorry. So this is a place where students really do need to follow the school-specific guidelines. My biggest note for students who are in that portfolio audition kind of place is really, really look at deadlines. Look for the words pre-screen. Make sure you're paying attention and helping your children to pay attention to when those deadlines are, because they are often early. There are often many more steps to the application process after they hit submit. So there's just a lot of details for that crowd. And this, Parents and Guardians, is a place where your students can really use your support and probably helping to organize them, and not doing it for them, but helping them learn how to organize those kinds of things. And one reason to not do that for them is because if they're going to be like a musical theater major in college and then they're going to go into musical theater, you're helping them to build the skills so that when they are actually moving into this profession, they know how to do all of this stuff. These multi-step audition processes, things like that, that they're going to have to do to make it in that business. You're helping them to build the skills to do that. But please support them through getting organized there, because it's a lot for a 17-year-old for sure. In terms of financial aid applications, financial aid, think of it as separate from the application process. It runs kind of parallel with the application process, but it's separate. When we talk about financial aid forms, there are two main ones out there. One, the FAFSA, that is accepted, used by most schools, that is apparently on track to open on October 1st this year. And that's the federal government's form. Then there's the CSS profile, which is used, College Board form. And that is used by a smaller number of schools, mostly private and expensive schools, but not all private and expensive schools. There's a handful of other ones. Some schools also have a school-specific form. Some schools will also ask you to give them more documentation, like verifying documentation of the stuff you have in the FAFSA and the CSS profile. But don't get caught up in all these little details and acronyms and everything else. My biggest tip for you, parents and guardians, is the most helpful thing that you can do now in regards to financial aid is to start looking at the schools your students are applying to and help and work on figuring out which forms are required, FAFSA, CSS, or both, and when those deadlines are. And the deadlines may correspond to how your student is applying. For instance, Drexel was with us just yesterday. They have one set of deadlines for their financial aid deadlines for their early applicants and a different deadline for students that apply regular decision. So you got to make sure you're paying attention there. Should you fill out things even if you feel you won't be eligible? I heard 2 stories just today from reps that tells me, yeah, I would do it as a freshman. Penn State, she was relaying a story about her own kid who wound up with her husband didn't want to file, said they weren't going to be eligible. They weren't, anything for any more than the loans. However, the student did wind up getting a specific merit scholarship from Penn State that was only for students who had filed the FAFSA. Didn't have to have any certain numbers, just needed to file the form. So wouldn't have gotten that if he didn't file. One of the other schools I was at today, I believe it was Miami, but it may have been University of Pennsylvania. It was one of the two. Talked about how they do use the CSS profile as an indicator of interest, even if a student is not available, and how it may unlock additional merit aid for a student. So maybe a reason to file the freshman year. Just as a heads up, you've already seen the form, hopefully, in the Genesis parent portal. The state, New Jersey, does require that families either file the FAFSA or their alternative financial aid application or opt out. In the parent portal, there's a form on the Forms tab called the FAFSA acknowledgement form. You can go back and you can edit it if you're not sure if you did it right and you want to go back and fix it. That's fine. It is kind of the reverse of what you think. So if you say yes, then you are opting out. You're not going to file, and it says all this on the form. And no is that you intend to file. If you intend to file, then you're going to go ahead and file the FAFSA when it opens. Basically, if eventually we don't get confirmation from the state that you filed, and no, I can't see your details, and no, I don't want to. If I don't get confirmation that you filed, then I start reaching out to you again and saying like, hey, are you going to file or you want to change your answer? So that's kind of how that process works. I saw a lot of questions coming through around like who sends what, how do we know things were done? So we're going to hit a couple of that. I got a handy dandy little map that I'm going to show you in just a second. My first thing is get organized. You heard me say a bunch of times, try to gather this information. linked in here and in the emails I keep sending out to students, and also in their score drive. There's a spreadsheet they can use as a starter. I don't care what they use. They got to kind of gather information. What are the deadlines? What type of applications? The financial aid deadlines? What forms are required? Gather that stuff together. That is really a great thing to do first. You see, there's a ton of resources. We want them to use their resources. I put together a lot of resources to help students so that even when we are not with them, they can help themselves. So I put together a Common App help guide. I recommend just like keeping it up in a separate window right next to the Common App. And then when they say, I don't know what the class size is, it's right there in the document. I don't know how to report my GPA. It's right there. What do I say about rank? Also right there. So everything's in there. Same thing for the stars. It's literally step-by-step, field by field that takes them through it. I have video tutorials, lots of other things out there. For those that want, just today I pinged out a college application checklist that is printable. So for those who kind of overwhelmed by the stuff in the checklist and score, which we're just trying out this year, the to-do list, there is a printable 4-year college application checklist that they can use to kind of keep themselves on track. And if I wind up with your student and I feel like they're really off track, I usually print out a copy of that and we work on it with them so that they can see that even sometimes in 20 minutes with me, they can cross off 4 different things, which makes them feel really good because they're making progress and they can get out of their little ruts that they get themselves in. It's really, really important that they follow the step-by-step directions that we give them and that they not go rogue and just try to do this on their own and not kind of participate in our process, because what happens then is that they don't participate in having their transcript and their stuff sent out and they miss deadlines. So we don't want that to happen. So we have 2 columns here, the things the student does and the things we do. And so what we're sending is a transcript. Sometimes schools require a school report. We're sending out the teacher letters of recommendation if a school, wants those letters once the teacher has uploaded them. We're sending out the counselor letter, and we're sending out an early decision agreement for the, the smaller percentage of students that applies to. Everything else is done by your kid. So sending out tests, SAT or ACT scores done by your kid. You see the word stars and you're asking me why I haven't done it for them. It's because it's self-reported and I am not the self that they are talking about. The self that they are talking about is the student. So they're doing that piece. And so that kind of is a good separation point for you. This tends to help people get the gist. So really what we're doing is we'll be working on some of these things with the students this week. So they want to set things up in SCORE so that we know how they're applying. So what I'm finding a lot of them need to do right now is they go into their little Common App and they open up that, and then they open up their applying list in SCORE and they start adding the schools that are on their Common App onto their applying list in SCORE. So that's how they get from one place to another. The student needs to enter them. Again, I can't see the Common App list, neither can anyone else. So they get them on that list in SCORE. Once they've done that, now that is communicating with the counselors and the teachers where the student intends to apply, but also most importantly, the deadlines by which they're applying. And that's how we all organize our work, right? So our goal is to first write letters for the kids with the deadlines on the 15th of October, followed by all the November 1st, etc. So that's how we organize our work. That's how we make sure we get stuff out on time. The student might need to do some other things, brag sheets, letter of recommendation requests, etc. They can still be working on those things. Some of their schools may need official SAT or ACT scores. And what official means is ordering them on the College Board. And I see someone's asking about it right now. And so some schools are going to require official scores. Some will allow self-reports. Talk about it a little bit more in a second, but they may need to do that. That happens well before the deadline because while things are digital, it is not instantaneous. Then the student submits their admission application. They move the school, they drag it over to the applied list on SCORE. And then we're like, hey, counselor gets a little ping. So-and-so submitted their application to Seton Hall. And then we're going to go into the system and see what's in there for that student and start to prepare the documents for students. And we're working on a lot a lot of applications and sending the materials for a lot of students. So keep that in mind. So this is not an instantaneous process, and it is also a process that has not really started yet because, again, we haven't started sending out transcripts. We just finished add drop. We're going to start doing some of those easier ones next week, hopefully, and be ready to go from there. The student can then submit their self-reported grades, but that's required. And then on the college end, what's going to happen is the student will be able to monitor. They're going to get a portal access for each school that they apply to, and they'll monitor information there to see when their application is complete. Also within SCORE, they'll be able to see that when things were sent. So they'll be able to look right in their SCORE account and see high school, they'll be able to click on, let's say, Bucknell within their My Colleges list. They'll look at the little page there and it will say high school transcript delivered on this date. Miss Smith's letter was delivered on that date. Miss Berliner's letter was delivered on that date. My counselor's letter was delivered on this other date. So they can see it all right there as well. So it's very transparent so students can see exactly what's happening. Again, not instantaneous. Does require that students also plan ahead, because if we try to accelerate from step 1 to the end step on November 1st, which is, for the record, a Saturday this year, Mrs. Thompson is not sitting home just in case Jimmy adds a school to his applying list on November 1st. And thinks I'm also going to get everything out on November 1st, because that's not going to happen. What we do is we work with the students who have the things on their list. And so you see, we don't typically send things out until after they apply. We make exceptions as we start to get close to the deadlines. Once we get to that last week in October, we send everything out that we have for anyone with any November 1st on their list. So kids can have them there. They can work all the way until November 1st. That's fine. But Mrs. Thompson's not working on November 1st because it's a Saturday. These are kind of a bunch of the different steps you'll see on the checklist. We're going to review these things with students, so I'm not going to kind of belabor them with you, but these are things that the students, many of them have done a lot of these things. If they haven't, we catch them up. They're working on their applications. Kind of just detailed that. Here's the most frequently asked questions that we see. We've mentioned most of these things at some point tonight. The sending scores, I promised I'd come back to this. There's 2 different ways to get scores to schools. It's important to take a look and see how that school wants them. So some schools, many schools now accept self-reported scores, which means that just like the self-reported transcript, they can self-report their scores. Different schools have a different method of doing this, like University of Delaware takes them within the stars. Other schools pull them off the transcript. UNC Chapel Hill requires that students self-report, and that's one of those October 15th schools. So don't bother spending $13 or $14 to pay College Board to send SATs to UNC Chapel Hill, because they won't even look at them that way. They want them self-reported, and they describe on their website how to do that. And don't worry, I send out reminders to those kids as we get close. Other schools, Rutgers, Pitt, Ohio State, they require scores directly from the testing service. So they have to log onto the College Board, send scores, or log onto ACT and pay to send the scores. I will start, you're going to get emails from me soon kind of giving you guidelines as for like, hey, if you have a November 1st that requires official scores, like you need to do that this weekend. Now is the time to do it to help you keep on track. But generally it's at least 2 weeks before the deadline. If your child is done testing, they know when they're applying, and they know they're definitely sending their scores, you could do this tonight if you wanted to. If you want to give them the credit card, you guys could go in tonight and pay to send your scores to Rutgers and check it off the list. Schools are going to get different things at different times. It is all going to meet up at the other end. But so you can kind of get this done a little bit sooner than later. It can be something that's nice to check off the list that at least you knew you took care of something. I talked about application submissions. One thing that's really important that I've been trying to emphasize to students is that once they submit their application, like we're done with that application. You can't change that application for that school. Now, that being said, we've got the common application. I said a lot of our students do that. What submits to the common application for each school is what's in the application at that point in time. So if I submitted my application to Seton Hall today, they get what is in my common app today. I could go in and change my essay and rewrite all my other things tomorrow and submit completely different materials, completely different information to say Rutgers, and that's okay. But when I change that information for Rutgers, it doesn't go back and update Seton Hall. So students should make sure that their application is in its best state for each school before they submit. Also important, they do not need to wait for us to be done. They submit when they are ready. Students submit when they are ready. They don't need their counselor letter to be done. They don't need teacher letters to be done. Again, it's all meeting up at the college or university. The deadline is 11:59 local time, our local time, on whatever the deadline is. So deadline is November 1st. Then the deadline is 11:59 p.m. on November 1st. Biggest tip, don't wait until the last few hours. There are Common App issues every single year with submission. It is a lot of stress. It'll be a lot of stress in your house if it is 11 p.m. and things are crashing on the Common App on deadline day. When do most students submit? The end. They procrastinate. I get it. It's normal. We all do it. But it can add a lot of stress. And there was a big Common App overhaul this summer. And that to me is prime time for crashing. So I really, really encourage them to give themselves some time in case there's any issues, and also some time to hopefully work through all of the possible things before November 1st hits. They could even get their stars submitted, everything else. They will feel so much better if on the deadline day, they already know their whole application, all the things that they need to do are there. That feels great for them. My top 3 issues: not putting the schools on score, thinking that I can see Common App. I can't. Not checking emails. That's the biggest thing. I mean, how many times today did I say I send them emails and try to save them from themselves? If they're not checking their emails, they don't see my life raft. They don't see my life preserver there, and they don't save themselves. So they need to check them. Not showing up for scheduled meetings, like not coming to our group meetings, not requesting appointments, kind of ghosting everybody, not doing anything. And then in December saying, hey, I don't know how to do any of this. I don't know what I'm doing. So opting in is important, even if we're not ready to move on all the details yet. Opting in so they have some clue what's going on is really, really important. And asking for help is really, really important. I will have help sessions. Informational gets sent out later this month during lunches, after school, things like that. Have appointments. The counselors have appointments as well, but we're not mind readers. They got to reach out to us. We're there to help them. But it is really important that they reach out. Just a couple things about Rutgers I want to mention, and we're going to dip on into the individual counselors sessions for those who have questions or kind of just want to get any specific information from their own counselor. And I would encourage you to do that. Rutgers, I want to just address it. 2 different ways to apply, 2 different applications they can do with either one. For Rutgers, what is really important to know is that students can apply to up to 3 schools within the university. It is extremely important that they research what they want to apply for in terms of a major. And I really like to see pretty much every student applying to more than 1 school within Rutgers. Even if they think I want to do business or I want to do engineering, I very, 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 very much encourage them to also apply to the School of Arts and Sciences, and probably also apply to School of Environmental and Biological Sciences if they're really set on being in New Brunswick. Otherwise, look at the Newark or Camden schools as well. Newark Business, Camden Business, Newark Arts and Sciences, etc. There is a school-to-school transfer policy. Students can transfer within the university, but this maximizes their chances of admission somewhere at Rutgers if that is important to them. If they try to add this later, if a student applies to Rutgers Business, is not admitted, wants to add another school in the end of January, it's generally too late. They can't add more schools at that point. If they had gotten denied to business and accepted to arts and sciences, at least it's on the table as an option that they can compare to the other schools they've been admitted to and decide what they want to do. My recommendation for test scores is definitely, I really don't see scores less than about 1,300 being helpful to them. Once we start to move higher than that, then I encourage them to kind of look at the chart that I'm going to show you in just a sec, and will be in their own presentation too, to get an idea about what their programs are looking for. The other important deadlines are that everything, including the stars, needs to be at Rutgers by November 1st. So they need to get that application in early so they can link their stars afterwards. And the regular decision, end of the road for Rutgers, is December 1st. So the stuff is done early. Here are the Rutgers numbers, just so we can all take a look. This is publicly available on the Rutgers website. It's also, you guys have a link to this. At the bottom, I've given you all a very clear breakdown about the 2025 group, who applied, how many, where I really see weighted GPAs admitted, what kind of numbers I see waitlisted, what kind of numbers I see denied. Last year, we did see some waitlist movement, mostly in May and June. Environmental and biological offered out a couple of spring admits. Was last year more competitive than year prior? Not really much. Pretty consistent with the year prior, honestly. But this is, kind of what we're looking at. Are we looking at more selective this year? Maybe we can be. That's definitely possible. Things have been getting a little bit more each year. So that's kind of what we're looking at for Rutgers. So I do think it's really, really important for students to get a perception of what that is. And if they're like, hey, I only want to apply to Rutgers, they definitely need to be applying to multiple schools. And I really, really encourage them to have a backup plan, whether that is applying to other four-year schools, either in-state or out-of-state, or deciding that their backup plan is that they will attend Raritan Valley. But I will reach out to students when I see Rutgers is the only school on their list, because we cannot guarantee answers. Again, so much support that we are going to provide to the students. And I do kind of have some tips for you all here. The biggest things I can recommend to keep your house from becoming a battle zone for the next 3 months. And by the way, I'm not looking forward to this, as my own student is a junior. So remind me of these things next year. Feel free to cut and paste them and send them to me. Really, really try hard to get them to do the work. You're training them for the long run here, and learning how to do a lot of these processes. So help them review things, provide guidance for things, but you're really not helping them if you do it for them, because they need to learn how to navigate complex processes and do things like that. So it's just really important. It doesn't end well, really. Don't contact anywhere on their behalf. Support them through doing that, and learning how to have those adult conversations and write adult emails and all of those good things. If we feel like it's getting very naggy in the house, a good recommendation can be a couple good tips. Set aside a specific day and time each week to talk about it, maybe on like Sundays after dinner or something like that. And we're going to set out your goals for the week and kind of set some targets, etc. That can be good, because then it doesn't become a 7 days a week. You feel like you're nagging and they're tired of hearing you. So they're just crawling into their shell and doing nothing. Point them in our direction. If they're really not doing anything, help them write an email to one of us requesting an appointment. Then the next step is we got to get them to come. But that's step one. Check your own email. And if you see those emails come in, like heads up your kid about things that they might have missed, if they missed some of the detail. You guys definitely can take the financial aid lift off of them, in terms of filing that necessary paperwork, because believe me, your kid does not understand the taxes piece, and what they're talking about when they ask about certain kind of assets. They're going to have to do their own piece of the FAFSA, which you'll need to support them through. But you can kind of take charge of organizing that stuff. We talked about the net price calculators as well. And so I just encourage you, really be patient. I'll warn you in advance, there's sometimes bumps in this process. It doesn't mean someone messed up. So resist the urge to send out like a howler to us, yelling at us that something didn't happen. First thing to do is get your student to look in their score account if something's not there. See if the school is on their list in their score account, because pro tip, if it's not in their score account, we didn't send it out, because again, we didn't know. If it's there, click on it. When does it say we sent the stuff? If it did, fantastic. That means we did our part. What didn't happen is it didn't match up with your kid's application yet. And that could, the most common thing is yet. It typically takes 2 to 3 weeks after the kid's application is there and our stuff is there for things to match up. These big schools are processing hundreds of thousands of documents and matching them up. It is not all manual. There is not all automatic. There are manual steps in there in confirming that the right things are attached to the right account. So that all takes time. So sometimes you just got to be patient until things match up. There is a time at which I'm like, hey, if you're not seeing your things matched up, like reach out to the school, see what's going on. Let them know when your high school sent it, and we'll talk you students through how to do that piece. At that point, if they're like, yeah, we don't have it, then say like, how can they resend it? And then if it's past the deadline, we'll resend it. And then I send them a nice little screenshot that confirms your school got it on exactly this date before the deadline. Please update your records and confirm when that's done. And that has worked 100% of the time. So there are resolutions when technology fails us there. So hopefully that, that's some good tips for keeping sane. We're going to be breaking down just a second into our groups. I'm going to let my counselor slowly pop off of here just to get one quick look at who your person is so that you know. And again, we've met me, I'm available. These are the different kinds of things I do. I have been meeting with students. I'm running about a week and a half to 2 weeks out on appointments at this point. Students can even reach out. We put things, on the calendar for a little bit further down the road, and that's okay. But they'll get pretty comfortable generally with coming to me for advice. So next step, those of you who would like to go ahead and pop into your individual counselor rooms on Google Meet, I encourage you to do that. If you go back to the email that I sent you all, the individual links are right in there. You can click right on them. If you prefer, we can QR code. You can type things in to get yourself there. And I'm just going to stay here for a few minutes while you all go off on your merry way. And I'll answer questions here. Yes, this will be recorded. I might be able to upload it by tomorrow. We'll see. And then I'll send it out once it's uploaded. And I will pull together the Q&A and send that out as well, too. That might take me a little bit longer. Have a fantastic night, and I will see some of you in the individual rooms. I'm going to leave this up for those that need it.